Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Sales. I'm Ashleigh and Ollie.
I'm Ollie Whitfield.
And I'm in a terrible mood. I'm in a terrible mood because we're stuck this week with Jared Robin as our guest. This just most boring and completely dull of guests. This is going to suck. Except I'm being completely sarcastic because Jared is amazing and I adore him and I thought that would make him laugh. But Jared, if you don't know him, he is the co-founder of RevGenius, which is, I think, one of the largest. It's certainly the most active sales community I've ever seen. They just surpassed 12,000 members in sales, marketing, and RevOps. If you're not a member, you should be. But Jared, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
No, this is going to be fun. So for those who don't know you or who know you as basically, I kind of figured you're like Tom from MySpace, but for RevGenius, like everyone knows who you are, but not a lot of people know a lot of your story. So tell our listeners a little bit about kind of Jared's sales journey.
That's a great question. And Tom from MySpace. That's
I'm dating or aging myself a bit there.
That's a throwback. I guess it means if my hair's down or up, right? But I digress. So my sales journey. Son of a salesman, and a teacher, and I left school and jumped right into sales. I realized I wanted to be people facing. I wanted to be the lifeblood of a company, and I was ready to do it. And left my first job after 3 months because I hated cold calling. So 15 years ago, I worked for Seamless Web, which is now Seamless, had 2 acquisitions. I just pieced out after 3 months. I didn't want any part of the future glory, right? We all make those quick mistakes. That was mine. I had no equity on the docket, so whatever. No harm, no foul. So spent, I was searching for validation, frankly, and I didn't get it at Seamless Cold Calling. I wasn't good fast, and that bothered me for whatever reason. So I went to deliver Mexican food for a little, and then found myself at FedEx, which was me using my logistics background, but also people facing. And here's where I had, the traditional ascend to glory, where I was passed over a few times for a promotion, then got it, and then went all the way to President's Club. Nobody else had done that. 1% in the country, like number 1 out of 500. And I'm great and this and that, and ego is bigger than ever. And I decided to leave to go into the startup world because I wasn't being challenged, at that point. So went from the biggest company, Fortune 100 company, one of the biggest companies, to a seed round startup with 1.5 million funding. I thought, hey, I could do anything, and realized quickly I couldn't. And the unique thing is, one year, 28 years old, I'm on top of the world, Amalfi Coast with my significant other at the time, and living the high life, having my director ask me what's next for me, to almost imploding of anxiety 2 years later. So talk about a turnaround, and boy, did I wish I went back and this and that, and couldn't sleep through the night. So realized that surface level success doesn't hide what's really under. And I spent the last 7 years in the startup world now, having integrated some of those fears, fortunate enough to finally turn it around 7 years later into something that's pretty active and a lot of fun.
So what was day one like then? If you said it was such a stark contrast, I mean, was it the holy shit, like, this is a big mistake? Or was it just, a culmination of everything coming at once, and over time it compounded when you left the FedEx world?
That's a great question. So that actually, it's getting me to think. The true answer is it was compounding, right? Probably since my childhood. What I thought was it was something new, that it wasn't there. But thinking back now, and frankly thinking back then, just like with a little different level of clarity, I had stuff bubbling. I had anxiety bubbling. There was a reason that I didn't realize it yet. Once a week, I couldn't sleep through the night or whatever. It was just the way things were going, right? Like I'd have a bad night's sleep, and then I'd follow up with a great night's sleep, so it would be okay by the third night. There are little things like that have probably been happening throughout my whole life that because they recalibrated relatively quickly, I didn't pay any mind to. That's actually the truth. Yeah, very much so.
It's
So
interesting. I gotta say, it's really interesting. I think a lot of salespeople deal with that is we feel the stress, we feel the anxiety, but then that one deal comes in. And it's like
there's always something.
everything's totally fine. No, it's not fine. You got it's the Band-Aid. It's the quick hit. It's the not to diminish in any way what's going on with the opioid crisis, but it's you got the hit of the painkiller. You got the painkiller. That's great. There's still everything, all the problems that were there with your pipeline, still there, even though the big deal came in. So what was there, if I can ask, and this is getting personal, what was your rock bottom? Did you have a rock bottom, and what did it look like?
So what happened was I made the transition, and I was in a relationship that wasn't working out at the same time, and I moved out of right at the start of the new company, first technology company ever, seed round startup. We went from 45 billion in revenue to 1.5 million in funding, right? Like that's a big difference. And an empty sales force versus everybody knowing your name. But I think the rock bottom part was a culmination of things. So I moved out of my our place. I moved into an office building because it felt like the move to make. I was getting I took a pay cut to take the job in SaaS. Amazing, this SaaS world, right?
The magic
Amazing
of SaaS.
It could be. The magic of SaaS. I went from 85K base to 60K base at 30, right? And I'm just showing context, right? Like there's some people that are doing more or less, but that's a relatively significant pay cut, and lost my relationship in the process. We were floating apart, and decided to pay half rent there and make sure that like she landed okay and all that, and got that comfort, and put myself through the discomfort instead, right? Because I wanted to be what I perceived to be a good person, right? When I was really not that good to myself, right? At all. So during this, I'm working at a Starbucks during the day for like a 2-month period, in between, her getting rid of that place and us subletting the old place and getting my new. And our product, then there were all these vibes with work, where we were getting results to present to clients or prospects, I should say, that were showing like this much uptick, and the results were wrong. And there wasn't that much uptick, and the product wasn't working. So then you get this feeling like I can't go back. I took this pay cut. I'm in purgatory, I guess, ish. And now I can't even do outbound because I don't believe in the product I sell anymore. Yet I know if this product works as well as it should, I took this risk for a reason, right? Like this product is the best thing that was on my plate. Nobody else was hiring me because we all know how hard it is to go from not SaaS to SaaS. That's one of many challenges in this professional world, one of many, many, many. And I'm like, I don't have any results yet here. So even making a lateral move in SaaS, they're not going to believe me or buy me or what, buy what I'm selling to them. So I have to stay here. And I have to weather the storm. And also I'm not getting paid on time because you don't do that at these types of companies. So I took a pay cut to not get paid on time. I remember eating like the Whole Food salad bar, which was great, putting everything on my credit card, which I would deal with the piper later. But I was, in the highest highs and the lowest lows, and then eventually found a place, and that might not have been rock bottom right there.
Yeah.
That was the step before it. And I remember
sorry, Jared, did you think it was though? Because obviously you didn't have the foresight of what was going to happen, but did you feel like it was?
Frankly, I didn't, because I just thought it was a cool journey and a funny story. And like, I had friends that were party promoters and were like going out and they're dropping me off in the office building. And I'm like, woe is me. It's not that bad. I'm not paying to drink. I might be drinking away my sorrows, but surface level, things were fun-ish. Product doesn't work. Who cares? I'm drinking for free tonight. thinking about it and talking about it like this is like the worst like spectrum possible, but yes.
Well, it's
So then I get my
there's something to be said for one of the things I know for a lot of people is something that comes from rock bottom is when you finally kind of that denial goes away. That moment when it's like, oh no, here's the full reality that I've been hiding from for however long. Or here's the pain I've been hiding from for however long. And then it hits you like a ton of bricks.
Oh yeah. So after that, like that was easy to like surface level get past.
Yeah.
And then I move it to my place, and then out of nowhere, I start waking up at 2:30 in the morning with my heart racing. When I say racing, like punching as hard as you can, and it not stopping until the next night. And then I remember I'd be popping melatonin. I don't smoke pot, but I made sure to smoke pot then. Anything I could do to try to go to sleep. And I'd go to bed for 2 hours, wake up, and then I'd be like, again. And then at 5:30 in the morning when the gym opened, I would go to the gym, walk for 45 minutes, tire myself out, sleep for 45 minutes, and get on calls all day. And then I remember my dad telling me it's okay to take Advil PM, just knock yourself out. And then I started, my dad had given me some tools, whether it's books or access to, he offering to pay like my first therapy session, all of this, and I'm so fortunate to have him. And I allude to that in LinkedIn, either directly or indirectly. Of like my call to action is follow my dad, like little stuff like that. And now like this book I turned down 10 years before, I'm like, maybe I should read it. And at the time, Robin Williams had just killed himself. And it was the same time. And I'm like walking around and I'm like, yeah, that's not me. But I get it. I'm like, I don't fucking know how to fix myself. And then I remember starting to read this book because I didn't know what else to do. I just knew that, I took him up on the therapy and I went as I'm reading this book that I'm reading now that I told you before, phenomenal. I'm reading it 7 times. Now you see why I read it 7 times.
What's the book?
The Presence Process by Michael Brown, specifically version 1, but I read both versions. Version 2 is readily available on Amazon. That's why I say version 1. So you have to go to the marketplace, but it's there. And so I went to this therapist that was phenomenal, and like, wow, this is the first time in my life I've willingly went. Things might be bad, but go Jared for realizing it. I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do, but I know it can't involve drugs because I don't want to go down like that. Because I remember going to the doctor and saying, I think I need Xanax. And he looks at me and goes, you do need Xanax. And I'm like, oh shit. Oh shit. Okay. And I went to this therapist and my dad spoke so highly of, and I sat down in the chair and I realized 2 things. One, she was phenomenal and like it was like lovely and everything. And 2, there was nothing her or anybody else could do to really fix what was deep. And I appreciated her, loved her, and I realized this was a solo job, or at least I felt that. And I needed to go inwardly and fight some demons. It was my journey, to be clear, because I don't advocate this for everybody, but it felt like that for me.
Yeah,
I did that.
I do want to be clear, just calling this out, because we're gonna talk about all this because we're getting there. I mean, we knew we were gonna come here. Just a quick disclaimer: we are not doctors. This is not medical advice. We don't pretend to have answers on anything to do with mental health or addiction or substances. We'll put some resources in the show notes. If you think if you're questioning whether or not you've got a problem, I strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to pursue some of these options. There are lots that do not involve a significant cash outlay. Even if you're in the States, there are resources available for low or no cost. But also kind of calling something out there. You mentioned, Jared, kind of for you, medication was not something that you wanted to pursue. But you also know that there are millions and millions of people that need that rely on that. And that is a key part of their process. And there's nothing wrong with that.
At all. My partner is one of them. And that comment I made, it was from the time, and how I feel now is my ego was battling the idea of needing that. Like to be honest, and now I'm like thinking about this, like thinking about like me battling that it's an ego play. And so many of us, we don't want to say that's us. And it is us. It's okay. But that's, oh my gosh, like that's me, Ashleigh. Like,
No,
It sounds like mentally you're saying,
yeah,
like, I know that
it could be anybody. And I
I'm
didn't
not
want to,
this.
admit that. And so many of us don't
Yeah.
want to admit that. And that drives us from putting a barrier, hence ego, right? A false protection against what is real and what is not. And that's big. And going back to rock bottom was this happening and me not being able to sleep without the lights on in my room at 30 years old or 31, whatever it was. Not being able, my sister and my family realizing this, being amazing, being like the family that we all wish we had, and some of us are lucky enough to have. Do you want to come to a movie? I couldn't sit through a full movie, like without having to get up and walk out because the anxiety was like coming out. And with all of that, I must say I'm blessed. And we all are blessed in the sense that the universe, and I don't want to get, fuck it, I'll get spiritual, will always guide us. And it doesn't mean it feels good, but they will throw something very obvious on your plate. I've seen. And yes, there's many ways to deal with it. And I want to be conscious and kind. My partner has other ways to do it, and I'm super supportive of that.
Totally. And I think it's, I mean, let's do some we before we started, we talked about, we were trying to discuss what we wanted to discuss, and we want to do some real talk about mental health. So like, let's get real when it comes to medication and that choice of whether or not medication is the right thing for you. That is so deeply personal on like 50 gabillion different levels. Like there's the wake up call, there's the decision, there's side effects, there's its role in treatment and everything. It's a crazy intense decision, and there's no right or wrong decision, period. And just to get on my high horse here for a minute, anybody who tells you, who is not a doctor or who is not a therapist, who is not trained in this stuff, who tells you what to do when it comes to this sort of medication, should not be talking to you. And you should not be taking their opinion as anything other than their opinion. You know what's right for you. And it's okay to be scared, and it's okay not to have the answer, and it's okay to go on and jump off, like with medically supervised tapers and stuff. But I think it's really, one of the things it sounds like has really been, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but has been part of your journey, is the journey to self-awareness as much as anything else, and figuring out that what anxiety looked like for you. Because that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is it looks different for everybody. I mean, for me, it turned into going numb. I stopped feeling things. I stopped reacting to things. I was laughing at the heart rate thing because I have totally had the waking up at 2 a.m. with heart palpitations. It's scary as hell. I thought I was having a heart attack. It's intense and scary when the world shifts underneath you, it feels like. And for the record, I mean, the numbers on the number of people struggling or actively seeking treatment for mental health or mental well-being has skyrocketed since the start of 2020. It's played on everyone's fears. And I mean, Jared, you mentioned this earlier, like salespeople, for whatever reason, we get triggered a hell of a lot more. I mean, we're rejected how many times a day? It's crazy. So I think kind of, we talked about going back to this real talk and pulling this back to a question and getting off of my soapbox here, because we all know I'm sure all three of us can monologue on this for hours if we wanted to. But I'm curious, kind of now that you're on the other side and you're very open about what that journey's been like what are what are some of the most common mistakes or issues you're seeing sales reps make when it comes to their own self-care?
I mean, it doesn't start and stop with sales reps. It's people in general. But for the purpose of this, you know, I've commented this week a lot on motion versus movement. Motion is the idea that we're doing a lot of surface level things, whether it's physical or even mental, to try to solve challenges. It could be anything from looking for new jobs, moving, going to the gym, a new diet plan, to try to change, our being and deep down. And that's and doing thinking positive stuff. And it's not that any of that is bad. It's just that it's motion. You're going through the motions and you're going to end up in the same spot, kind of like a dog chasing its tail, except a dog has more fun, right? Versus movement. Movement is going deep and just to the emotional level and understanding, the fear patterns or the reactions that have happened for years since your childhood, and integrating them so that you could have serious movement, a shift in your being, and then all the motions at the surface, everything will just start aligning, whether it's your relationship with money, whether it's your relationship with other people, your relationship with yourself, etc. And I think that's a big thing.
Do you think there's sort of blind spots that a lot more people have than we realize? Like you said with money there, especially for a salesperson. I've been there. I'm not even a salesperson, but I've been there when you can see that the deal getting close to the deadline or whatever it is, or you're nowhere near your targets, and it's like the dread when it doesn't come off. Obviously, that's like a very common trigger. We all kind of know that one, but I feel like there's in some roles as well, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to get out of that role and get to the next one. It's kind of a done thing to know this is an 18-month role, this is a year role, and we don't necessarily think that that's a real trigger, though it is. There's like ones hidden in the dark, I think. Have you seen any like that, or am I waffling basically? Do you feel like that's accurate?
There's so many triggers and so much going on, like and everybody has different emotions to different triggers, missing marks, passed over for promotion. Like, there's
going
some
on
easy
LinkedIn
ones.
and seeing everyone else bragging about how great they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much stuff out there, and with social media now, there's just more opportunities to be triggered. And I say now, like now refers to the fact that business people are on social media for work as well, versus just like the Instagram and Facebook community, etc.
So how do you manage that? How do you pace the triggering, as it were?
So
or how do you counter the triggering to make sure that you don't end up back in the dark place?
So it's integrating fears. And right now, I said this week, week 2 of the presence process, going again, I acknowledge my reflections in the world, like things that cause me to react. I acknowledge them. I watch it like a movie. And then it's understanding, there's a process, understanding that it's not the event, it's how it makes you feel. And that feeling has been there before, right? That event might be the new thing. You might have a new best friend and they do something to irritate you or something, but that feeling has been there many times since your childhood, and getting to the root of it, feeling it, labeling why, realizing, if you want to get deep with it, that it's a relationship with how you were loved growing up, or lack thereof, your definition of love. And when you get that message, it's really, really enlightening. It's really, really releasing, in the sense that, like, you're realizing, like, I'm getting triggered, and once you start getting messages, you stop getting triggered. So that's the difference between emotion, like getting to that emotional level for true movement versus just motion, right? Like, oh, I count to 10 or say the ABCs backwards. Sure, that'll get you past here, but it won't stop it from coming. So that's just where I'm trying to get.
I wonder if did you notice any of this when you're at FedEx? Because the way you describe it, that's when everything's great. And obviously there will have been, not every day's fantastic, is it? But
No.
you didn't really say that anything like this was prevalent at all during that point. And how many years did you say you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't notice it, right? But like, it's funny how much we don't admit is wrong when the tide is high, right? Like, I snapped at my family all the time. My immediate family, there were other things as well.
The
And
symptoms were there, you just didn't recognize them as symptoms.
yeah, other people did, but my ego was too big to listen. It's still there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not done with that, but I'm trying to knock it down.
You gotta have a little ego in sales. You gotta have just a little. So we've talked about kind of your journey and all this stuff, and now I'm curious what this journey that you've been on specifically, how that's affected RevGenius, because RevGenius is kind of the sales story of 2020 in a lot of ways. Founded out of Thursday night sales and all that stuff. And it came out of freaking nowhere to being like this main cornerstone of a lot of sales culture. And from my perspective as a user, early, but not that early, what struck me about RevGenius was it was one of the first communities I tried to engage with, and I tried to engage with others. But this was the first one that felt like it was really driving one-to-one connections instead of doing kind of chat rooms, as it were, where people would just drop their content and pick some fights and go about their business. Can you think of any specific experiences or things you knew you wanted to do with RevGenius based off of this journey that you've been on?
Yeah. So, oh man, I could take that so many ways. So Galen and I met. And we aligned on so much. And my thing was I'd been in these other communities, MSP. I don't want to name
Other communities.
Other communities that are phenomenal. They're great. And one, I saw a big gap, and two, I saw simultaneously, I had this idea with my life that you have to give along the way. And if I could find something super congruent with that, that would be, some way that I could work and live and all that. So the idea of community was big for me. For a while, I worked in a couple two-sided marketplaces for a little bit, and that was like the beginning of that. But then with RevGenius, we created like a place where people could go when their work wasn't being kind to them or the world wasn't being kind to them. And we realized that like empathy in sales was lacking. People, irony, people threw the word around, but people didn't digest what it meant or maybe even look it up what it meant. Like it's not just listening, but it's feeling. And we're like, how could we do that with others? And then we developed like, let's just give at all cost mentality. And so channeled all that, not to try to solve others' challenges, but to just give. And that could be like give an interview, that could be give advice, that could be just be there for them. So yeah, you see that around quite a bit, like our community and others, because like at all of our core, like we want to be good people, and we are. We are. You can make funny exceptions, but or point funny things out, but like we do, and we were able to activate like what's already in all of us, right? And just be like, hey, it's cool to give. And somebody just got a job yesterday after 2 months of not being in SaaS, being in like the restaurant industry, and the community got him in. And his response is, I'm paying it forward. So yeah, it's very much in the interweaving of RevGenius.
I love it. All right, Jared, this has been, I was going to say a hoot, and I'm like, no, that's too blasé, given how deep this has all gotten. Thank you for sharing your soul and your experience, and being open and vulnerable. I know it means a lot to a lot of people. And now, to lighten things up a little bit, we're going to end this episode the same way we end every episode, with the lightning round. So this is a series of rapid fire questions. Don't stress out. Don't think too much about them. Start off with something nice and simple. What's your morning routine?
Gym, iced coffee. Yeah, walk the dog.
What's the dog's name and what type of dog?
Stevie Nicks. A poodle, a cockapoo.
Okay, next up, Jared, who is one person who's had a massive impact on your career?
My dad, my mom. They've had an impact on my life, and as far as I'm concerned, that's everything.
Absolutely true. What's your pump up song?
Right now, A Lot by 21 Savage. He has a line. Are you familiar? He's a UK based rapper, but originally in Atlanta. All the money you got, a lot, all this, and he has this one line that is, some rappers make millions, others make memes. So I think about that. Some sellers make millions, others make memes. I'm like, is that?
Now it's going to
is
be running
that
through my
kind of
head
funny?
every time I'm scrolling LinkedIn now. Great.
Now I can't hear that song the same way. Now I'm thinking about it like that. Okay, well, what's one thing that you wish you'd learned earlier in your life?
I don't know. Jeez. Come back to it.
What's your favorite sales book?
Cap selling or never split the difference.
What's one way that somebody could have been a better ally to you at some point?
I'm a white man being asked this question, so I'm definitely in the majority.
Being asked by a white man as well.
The irony, right? I'm fortunate to not have an answer so quickly for that.
Well, then maybe you can have, you'll probably be able to answer this one. What's one way you're working to be a better ally for others?
Showing up, and showing up means that knowing no activity is taking a side, right? Like not taking a side is taking a side. So you should speak up.
And what's the guilty pleasure that you go to after a bad day?
Chocolate or Popeyes.
All right, Jared, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on, for bringing your whole self, for showing up. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn.com/in/Jared Robin, or RevGenius.com, or Jared@RevGenius.com.
All right, we'll put all that in the show notes as well. Thank you, listeners and viewers, for joining us for another episode of Other Side of Sales. If you enjoyed this, please share it, like, subscribe. It means a lot, does a lot to help the mission. Always check out othersideofsales.com. We are new on Instagram and Twitter. Those accounts are much more active now than they used to be. So please make sure you're following OSOS_pod, because I screwed up when I set up the Twitter and put the founded date instead of my age. So Twitter thought I was setting up an account for a 1-year-old, and we got Other Side of Sales banned. But please do follow us on Twitter, OSOS_pod, or Other Side Sales on Instagram. We'll put lots of clips from the show up there so you can share some of Jared's wisdom with your community as well. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time on Other Side of Sales.